Hello and welcome to my new video. If you're new here, hi, I'm Lex, and today I wanted to do a tutorial style video for Tiny Glade of just a few different ways that you can elevate your builds from looking very beginner to looking very advanced using very easy tactics, very easy steps. So I want to start with a sort of beginner house. I'm going to do a speed build here just so you can see, a very basic build. If you're just getting into the game, it's fun to experiment and figure out what you can do in the game. I definitely recommend just making some throwaway houses at first to get an eye for the game, to figure out what each thing does, how you can work the different buttons. I mean, some things are just not as intuitive as they could be. Like, you can continuously click on the windows and doors to spawn different items around them as opposed to keeping whatever they auto spawn with. That's interesting. Would not have guessed. There's also all kinds of tools that you can use with the houses, the fences, etc. There are ways that the pathing interacts with different items, but this is my example of a very beginner house, just very basic things happening here to make this building come to life. It's still beautiful, don't get me wrong. I think the developers have just made a stunning game here. I'm currently, by the way, using the camera mode to act like I'm walking around the build. That is what we're doing. But this is super simple, a very easy build to make, and I want to talk about how you can just as easily create things that are just a little bit more aesthetically pleasing, a little bit more visually impressive. So here I'm going to start by placing a square, the rectangular style of building. Any size will do, but I made mine a little sizable because we're going to start with layering. So one thing that will immediately step your builds up is learning how to layer them. I especially like making a sort of courtyard vibe. So you can go ahead and flatten your house. If you create the the building style that is made of wood, it'll give this fencing around the top when you get rid of the roof. I think that is stunning, and again, I just made a slightly sizable house so that I could add another building on top of it, so I got another rectangular building and made it a little bit smaller than the first, and this will be my first little house on this area. You can also lift the bottom of the house to make the bottom of this building on par with the top of your courtyard building that you're using, but we'll get into that later. You'll see what I mean. I use different styles of buildings to create visual interest, so here I'm adding a little circular tower, a turret if you will, just to make this a little bit more pleasing or textured. Now that I've sort of started building on this little deck, I knew I needed to extend it a bit because I wanted to add a sort of shed-like building to the front right corner. So here I'm doing that. I wanted to extend it a little bit up and make it a little bit smaller. But I just like the way this looks. It's like making a mini town square, kind of. So I like using these as practice builds, I guess. This is a good warm-up to kind of get into the game, just making a little town square vibe using the flattened building as a deck. I don't know what better thing to call it because deck isn't right, but we'll figure it out. I also use pathing here to create steps into this area, and it just worked really well. I love that the pathing interacts with different things. You can also use it to make doors on the buildings. I will be using windows to do so on these though, because they are elevated a little bit, and I just think these doors look better and more rustic for the vibe I'm going for in this town square. But just another good thing to keep in mind, that the pathways can create doors, they can create double doors, and eventually if you keep extending them, they create open arches. So this is another thing that I think is good to experiment with, just figuring out how pathing interacts with different things in the game. Okay, I had to finish yapping about the pathways, but as you can see here, I just did a double layered building by creating a thinner turret to stack on top of the first. This is another thing you can definitely play around with. I've also sped this portion up because it's mostly just me decorating with windows and doors, which I've already explained, and also it's just something that you pick up as you play. I didn't really want to include this as a step, but I wanted you to see how the build comes together for me. But yeah, to get back to it, whenever you stack two buildings, there is a tool that snaps them into place automatically so that they are centered with one another. And again, I just made a slightly thinner turret to go atop the first in order to create that effect where it looks double layered. You can also do this with the rectangular buildings. It's just something you'll want to test with different builds that you do. I also do love using these little terraces as micro builds. I think it's just a good way to limit yourself so you don't feel overwhelmed by how big the glade actually is. And it's a cool way to see what you can fit into a small space. So here I'm just going through and finishing some decor and then fixing the roof colors. The building colors themselves are also editable. So again, just go in and see what you like, what you're vibing with. I love this. I think it turned out super adorable. Just a tiny build that looks so good. I also went into the walking mode again so you could appreciate it. But even though all of these are very simple tools, this looks so much more elevated than just the simple cottage house that we started with. This video is overall going to be a mix of real-time and speed building, just because I think some of the things that I'm doing here, it's just convenient to be able to see it happen in real time. So like setting up these buildings here, my goal is to make a bridge. I wanted to talk about, you just saw how I flattened a building in order to make it into a terrace on which I could place other buildings. Now I want to do a bridge by flattening a building, and that is a different vibe. You have a lot of options there too. This time I'm using two turrets, but I made one of them rectangular just again for visual interest. I wanted to line it up really well with the cylinder building we already have and make them approximately the same height. I'm gonna raise the other turret too, don't worry. But yeah, just so you could see these tools being used in real time and get a feel for them, I wanted to do the double layer trick with this turret as well, just to add, again, visual interest. Very important when you're playing a very aesthetically based game like Tiny Glade. So this one I set on top and it swallowed the first one for a bit, but it's okay. I shortened it. This took a lot of finagling, I'm not gonna lie. It was really difficult for me to decide on what thickness I wanted for each of the buildings, but we're gonna leave it at that so that I can get to the bridge. So this is my next tip for building. You're gonna wanna create a thin but long rectangular building in this case. I mean, obviously you can make your bridge however you want. Mine is going to span between these two buildings. First of all, you're going to get rid of the roof, and you can have the wooden fencing or the stone battlements on top. That is up to you. There is also a tool to remove either so that your building is flat on top. Do whatever feels right to you. I believe in you, but I lined up this bridge, and you can go ahead and use the slider on the right to raise the bridge so that it's not on the ground. If you wanted to have a sort of floating walkway, you can see me messing with that here. So you can flatten the building like this in order to create that kind of bridge. I want to try something additional though, and this is going to flow into another tip. Here is the floating walkway. I'm going to go ahead and put mine back on the ground and raise it, and I want to try to create a bridge over water, right? So there is a water tool that allows you to create water wherever you want, including under buildings, right? So this looks fine, but you can also create arches using the pathing. I told you, it's incredible what the pathing is capable of when it interacts with the other buildings and things. I went ahead and put pathing in the water, and that created these tall archways. Now I'm just going to duplicate that effect on the back, and then you've got a floating pathway, except balanced on these really cool arches. This, again, took a little bit of finesse, and that's just the case with the game. You might have to mess around a little bit to get them to be even. I was like, why is this one giant arch instead of matching with the front of the building? I added water and chat. It was fine. We figured it out. It was okay. So that is my second tip, using these pathing and water moments to create these beautiful archways. I'm also going to go ahead and decorate these buildings a little bit. So I hope you enjoy. I hope you like also the sounds of the game, which I leave up when I haven't sped up the clip. I think this game is so, I don't know what the word is, auditory wise, it is so satisfying. Another tip I have for you is to add color using the banners. Obviously, like I said, you can change the color of the building itself, but if you wanted to add more subtle touches of color instead of the entire building, the banner item is so useful and it's so pretty. You can change the pattern on it just by clicking it, and you can change the color whenever it creates a garland. When two of the banners are close to each other, they will alternate the colors of whatever you've made the banners, like I did here with the two different kinds of green. So that's just a fun tip if you want to add some color to your build. And you know, decor right now, at least, I'm making this video in October of 2024. At this time, we do have pretty limited decor options. Another thing you can do is create smokestacks. So if you missed it, I made a little hole window and then put the smokestack beneath it. This is literally just using the chimney item. The chimney itself is usually too bulky for the buildings that I'm making, but turning them into a smokestack is so cute to me, and it adds not only visual interest, but an animation because you have the smoke coming out of it. It just looks so cool. I love adding that to my little turrets and cottages. Like, it just looks so cool, kind of steampunky almost, so it's adding a different vibe to your build, and I love it. I think it looks so good. I'm also experimenting with windows here on this roof. You can change the roof, like being concave or whatever, by clicking on the left mouse button. The right will obviously open the editor for buildings. The left mouse button, if you use it and click on a roof, it will let you change whether the roof is very pointy or kind of rounded. So another just useful tip for you. Yeah, I'm already back on my bull crap with layering using a terrace, so I'm just gonna get right into that here. Little refresher, so you're gonna want to flatten the roof. You extend the building however you need to give yourself the room to build onto it. Here, I wanted to exemplify how you can center a rectangular building too, so I switched this to the wood and got it placed as I wanted it. I knew what angle I wanted to photograph this area, and so I just wanted something to the left of my initial turrets with bridge, just to give something on the side that's also pretty, and of course to give you more tips. So this one, my little trick here, is going to be that you can use pathing, I think I mentioned earlier, to create doors, but just like I did in the water, you can use pathing to create arches even if you're not in water. So that is what I'm doing here. I'm just going to go ahead and put some pathing under this building, and then we have some arches on the building, which I think always looks so pretty. Then I'm going to go ahead and work on the height of it, make it feel right to me based on the other building. I am then going to place the other building on top and get started on that. Whenever you have these open archways, it is important to line up the top building with the top of the first one you place, just so you can't see the building through the arches. I played around a little bit with putting this building on stilts, but I think I do eventually settle on lowering it so that it's even with the top of our first building, if that makes sense. I also do want this one to have a roof. It's kind of adding to this, like, I don't know, this has kind of a edge of the castle vibe. You can also create little porch areas by removing the roof of a building and attaching it to the other one. I lowered this building, this little turret, so it would be level with the initial building that we placed, and as you can see, it makes the fencing disappear where the two buildings meet, and then you have a sort of balcony or overlook. I also created an archway at the bottom of that building just so it would match, and I think that is stunning. So this is just one of many ways that you can get creative with the ways that you combine the buildings. I know people have done so much, especially with layering them where they're not all the same height, but they still add on to each other beautifully. Another trick I've just recently started doing is clustering my windows. So you can see I did them on the roof here. You can only combine up to 3 windows into one unit, but you can still place other windows alongside those. And I think it can look so cozy and just a little over the top, which I love. It just looks so cute on the roof, these 5 little windows clustered together, you know? It's a vibe. I also, like I said, I sped up the decor elements so that it wouldn't be like 30 minutes of me tapping on a window because those are the vibes. I'm also going to be adding banners to this building as well because, like I said, they're a great way to add color because our decor is limited, but you can add these little babies to whatever wall you want and it's perfect. Another tool I haven't made enough use of in today's video is the trees. I wanted to go ahead and fill in some areas that would be empty with trees, so my priority was making sure that there would be lushness in the areas that are visible in the picture I wanted to take at the end. I knew what I wanted my camera angle to be, so I went ahead and added trees where they would be visible in the photo. But as you go, obviously, if you're extending your village or whatever, you're not going to want trees in the way. You can add trees whenever you're getting close to completing a build. I did like the way this pond looked coming out from the bridge, so I went ahead and added a pathway around it. Imagine that the path extends into the woods. Now I want to talk about fences and castle walls. So here I just chose to use castle walls, but if you right click on a wall or a fence, you can trim that piece of fence, you can cut it, and then the pieces of wall act differently. They act independently of each other. So I made my archway section a little bit taller than the fencing, the castle wall to the right and to the left. You can also extend these walls and they will keep their height that you gave them. I love this tool. I think they did such a good job with the fencing and the castle walls. I love that you can change the heights like that even after you place them to make it more dynamic of a structure. Like I said, I raised my arch a little bit higher just for the look. And then, I mean, look how cute our build is coming together. I love the winding pathway. The dirt path feels just so natural. I can't wait to see if they'll add some more urban looking pathways in the future, maybe some like cobblestone or something, very Minecrafty. But yeah, then I was just kind of looking at decor again. I have one more tip for you. Though I did want you to see the fence that I added around the pond because I think it looks so good. I just right clicked on the fence to be able to edit and shorten it a bit because it felt a little tall in this area. I'm not really blocking the pond, you know, I still want it to be visible, but look how cute it is when it's shortened. Adorable fence, bro. Okay, on to the last tip I just mentioned. Another thing you can do is create land here, the cliff tool. You can change the cliff so that they blend with the side. You can use pathways to create stairs. I sped through this because I wanted to show you an example that is a little more illustrious that I made. I just wanted to give you the basics here for how you can create these like steps. This is a spooky town that I made using this tip. So raising the land just kind of made it way more dynamic. We've got this palace at the top, and then it's kind of creepy, the green lights and everything coming down the cliffside. I made my steps, my cliffs very sizable so that houses and stuff could fit on them, but this tool is another that is just so useful. It's so nice to be able to give some buildings height and others not. I mean, even just for photos or for creating cool shadows and stuff, I changed it to daytime so you could see this build a little better, see how the cliffs worked. Water, unfortunately, will cut all the way down to ground level if you use it with a cliff, so just keep that in mind. Water only exists on the ground level. These were just a few tips I've picked up from playing Tiny Glade a bit here and there. I hope you're loving the game, and I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to share any tips that you have in the comments, and let me know what kind of builds you want to see in the future. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.